Live from the Motor City, all the way to the Volunteer State. It's time for the Reckless Speculation Podcast, where we recklessly speculate the latest news in the world of sports. From college football to NASCAR, we've got you covered. And don't forget to stick around for the world-famous Bet Your Nuts, where we will give you your best bets to make the most money. Now sit back, grab your favorite drink of choice, and join Robbie Davis, Raj Mehta, Brandon Chain, and Tom Sloan. It's showtime.
Wow. What is happening, world? It's been a long time. I'd like people to know also that quickly in my professional world, I had someone who's an executive at a very large health system realized that when I said sports podcast, she had Googled us and she's been watching. So I won't say her name, but it makes you wonder what you have said. And it's been quite a while. So no regrets. But I want to say,
no regrets.
No regrets,
dude. I want to say thank you for her and welcome everyone back to Reckless Speculation. We're excited to be here. Robbie Davis is at a friend's birthday party or something. Big ups to Tom. Tom does everything for us. Ooh, I think you moved out into the speakeasy or something.
Yeah, we had a heat wave today, 40 degrees, so I'm out here.
Wow. So that looks very nice. And Tom is the engineer, the show planner. He's the face. He's everything. And Tom got a new job. And so he doesn't have time for us, which we absolutely agree with for him, for his sake. But no, we're stoked to be getting on. We've only really missed much in the world, just 3 catastrophes in my home area of Southern California, an election, the NFL playoffs, and something I think that we're going to start with right now, which we're just going to jump right into it, folks, because we don't have Robbie here to slow talk and then make me laugh. But we're going to get right in to Brandon Chain and the 2024-25 Ohio State Buckeye National Championship football team, the national champions. Brandon, congratulations.
Thank you.
Let's just start real quick. Actually, I'm just going to hammer it right now. How the fuck did you guys lose to Michigan at home 13-10? Because that team I saw was like the greatest show on turf, going back to like Kurt Warner and Isaac Bruce and those guys. Torrey Holt. Sorry, man, I'm old. But like, you know, LSU a few years ago with all those dudes with Chase and Jefferson and Joey Cool, Joey B. How did that happen before we get into Ohio State?
I mean, you know.
How about Tom? How did that happen, Mr. Michigan?
The only thing I can say is Michigan coming into this season, the offense was a big question mark, knowing that they lost all these pieces. But the one thing that I think myself and other Michigan fans thought they could hang their hat on was, its defense is probably going to be pretty good. They had a lot of guys coming back. You had Kenny Grant. You got your boy from
Rancho, Anaheim. Yeah.
Rancho Cucamonga. And the fact of the matter is, it never happened. They just never seemed to put it together, except for the USC game and then the Ohio State game.
Don't get me started on that shit. And plus, you knocked out one of our best players with a cheap shot targeting. But who remembers that?
Debatable. But anyways, I think you look at the way they stepped up, and years have passed. I don't think Michigan players so much really understood what the rivalry meant. And if I can give Harbaugh credit, I am not a Harbaugh guy. I never have been. But he did get the message across, and it kind of emulated to the coaching staff that was there this year that, this game matters. If anything, disappointing season, leave it all on the field for that game. And they played their heart out. Michigan just ran the ball, which their offense was putrid, but
you wonder why Khalil Mullins, he had 116 yards. They gave him the ball 30 times.
Mm-hmm.
And do that all year. And it makes you wonder, like how and why that didn't happen. That being said, Brandon, I thought I saw a team that, number one, deserved to be 12-0 in terms of sheer ability. One of the great power offensive teams, not to mention defensively across the board, dominating people. Number one, Oregon, 42-17 over Tennessee. A loss at Oregon, which should not have happened for multiple reasons. Howard lost his mind. But this Michigan loss, I don't want to make too big of a deal out of it. Isn't this one of the best Ohio State teams we've seen in forever? And that one loss, however that happened, is a stain, like keeping them from being great.
Yeah, so a lot of people will call it a stain, and most Buckeye fans will as well. And I was one of the first to lose my mind as well. But it's also equally the best thing that happened to this team. It's the best thing that happened to this coaching staff, because if you watch that game, we were handcuffed in the playbook, and they had this sense that we were all of a sudden this power run team, and Michigan had one of the better run defenses, in the country. And it's not, I mean, they really, their front was awesome, and we just could not get out of our own way. And I think that was the hard-headedness and stubbornness of Day, trying to be physical and blah, blah, blah. And that's not what our team is. We have athletes and weapons all over the field, and we play in space. And that's what our offensive coordinator teaches, and that's how he coaches, is in space, get those guys the ball. So once we lost that game, I think that was a real wake-up call for, the whole coaching staff and the players. These seniors that came back and wanted to, make a run, this was a wake-up call for sure.
It had to be a shock. And at the time, Ohio State was almost a 20.
19 and a half. Yeah, 19 and a half,
yeah.
I think.
And so quickly, because Pete Carroll is a god to me, and he's going to my crappy Raiders, but I'm stoked on that. We're not going to get into that today, but the Raiders 2 years ago won in Kansas City on Christmas Day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's about equivalent. Actually, it's worse than this because Michigan is the defending national champions. Mahomes had said that, and Andy Reid, the Walrus, said he credited them with basically showing us a number of different holes. And really, like you said, after you play Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, and then let's not forget a top 5 pick in all likelihood, and Will Johnson, who can go, man up with Jeremiah Smith. Smith
who did not play.
Oh, he didn't play? Well, there goes that freaking art. I told you I didn't.
Well, we didn't.
I thought it'd be 70-0.
We didn't throw the ball either, so.
No.
I know
there was no outside threats whatsoever.
He missed the last 4 games of the season.
Well, preparing for his trip to the Las Vegas, I'd feel the same way. I'd fucking need a lot of time as well. But no, there goes. But it still doesn't change the schematic at the scheme.
Sure.
And obviously, Ohio State, even though it's a rivalry shot, thought they can, show up and win, and that wasn't the case. But let's go specifically to the playoffs itself. The final had an excellent game, but why don't you guys remind me of the 2 seeds that played in this out of the 12? Can someone not remind me?
7 and 9, I believe.
No, Ohio State was 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ohio State was 8.
We were 8, so they were
8.
7.
Was
7.
it 8? Yeah, something like that.
This is what happens when you've been off for like 6 weeks, and I just got home from a 10-year-old basketball practice. That's making me lose my mind. But anyways, it was 2 teams, long story short, that played the first weekend. And I know in baseball, my Dodgers, of course, won it all. Shocker that I'm a Dodger fan, but this was the first time they were playing meaningful games, i.e. in playoff mode. Just like in the NCAA tournament, when teams that play in the first 4 tend to do pretty well. They know the environment, the setting, game flow, what's to come, blah, blah, blah. Now, I argued in football it's different because you're playing 4 games, you guys both did, against top-notch physical teams over 5 weeks? I'd be like, screw that. I'd want another week off. What's a week really make after you've already had 4 weeks? Am I right that it's not that big of a deal and it was just the seeding that sucked? Or is there a reason why 2 teams that played the first weekend played in the final?
Well, we talked about this a little bit last week. The seeding was wrong, completely wrong. And I do believe they'll address this after next year to where you could win your conference, we'll just say it, the Big 12. You can win the Big 12. And you're going to get in. It doesn't mean you're going to get an at-large top 4. I do believe the top 4 teams were not seeded correctly. And no disrespect to SMU, what they accomplished, to Boise, what they accomplished,
Indiana.
But yeah, but the grand scheme of things was what makes for good competition. And when you look at it, at the end of the day, the 4 teams that had the byes all lost. And of those 4 teams in round 2, only one of them was actually favored. So I think you look at that aspect and realize that, we got a problem here. So they're going to have to fix that. They're going to have to look at it in the sense that, okay, you win your conference, you're going to get in. But once everyone's in, once the 12 or 16, which will be the case in years to come, once they get in, I think then they'll get rated and just to make sure that, the best matchups and the number 1 ranked team actually gets, beyond the second round. But also you can't wait 4 weeks to play football. They need to, you have your conference championship games, maybe wait a week and then get right to it.
But they went 12 games, right? And then 13 with the conference championship.
That's too long of a break for these kids. I believe in momentum.
And when 16 games, 17 games with the, they're not sitting at home training all week and they have school theoretically and other things. That's a big.
But it was bad football.
At 4 games.
It was bad football. Bottom line, it was bad
absolutely.
Football early on until the last 2 rounds, because those teams had been playing. They had been playing for 3 weeks, so they had their legs under them still. And these earlier seed, these top 4 teams, they're off for 4 or 5 weeks. Man, you lose your rhythm, you lose your momentum, and by the time they take the field, they didn't have a chance.
It's going to be a problem. And Shane, I was going to ask you, do you think this year there was kind of a buffer? Not saying the committee knew this, but number 1 with Bama not being Bama, but number 2, maybe, hey, let's throw in some fresh blood, see what we got here across the country, different markets. Arizona State absolutely belonged. Sam Levitt, I knew about Scatabo, was a beast, but Levitt, a transfer from Michigan State, I was like, this kid's going to be a star. But, like we said, Clemson, Boise State, SMU, Indiana, there were some questionable selections.
Mm-hmm.
Is that because of them wanting to market a new product, if you will? Or do you think it's a flawed system as it is and they should cut down the number of teams that are admitted?
I think it's a flawed system as it is, for sure, because the committee has no idea if they're judging on record or, eye test or strength of schedule or just total wins. Just like Indiana's the perfect example. They played nobody all year.
Mm-hmm.
We easily handled them in the, one game that they played against the top ranked team. And that was their only loss. And then they got boat raced. They looked awful. So just because
not the last 2 minutes, Notre Dame gave them the window and they almost took advantage of it.
Notre Dame was very vanilla in that game. They knew they could basically push those dudes around. And it got a little tight at the end, but
it is tight.
It was
the game it was over. But
I agree.
And to my point on that, on the flip side, like I underestimated Notre Dame all year long. Like I didn't think they were as good as they were. I love Marcus Freeman and what he's done there. Don't get me wrong, but I just underestimated him. I thought Penn State was going to pull their game off, and they didn't. And then I was like, okay, Notre Dame's got something. And then they kept rolling, and so it made me nervous for the national championship game for sure. But regardless, the system is flawed and it's got to be fixed. Like Oregon got screwed. They had the worst and hardest bracket.
Mm-hmm. As the number one seed.
Yeah, we talked about on a couple shows. Yeah, whoever won the Tennessee Ohio State game, we thought would probably come out of that bracket and at least make it to the championship game.
But the committee gets cute in NCAA basketball. That's what I took it as. Okay, they didn't lose, so we can't really drop them down. Even though if they go into Ohio State and lose by 1 point, that would be different. But at home, very favorable treatment and some different plays.
So
but
that brings.
I think everyone knew they weren't the number one team in the country. I did, but I hate that.
Yeah, right. But you've got to take pre-season rankings and seedings into account now, because that makes a huge difference. Because like you said, if you don't play a schedule and you don't play anybody and you're ranked, number 8, you're not going to really drop from number 8. I mean, you're going to make it into the playoffs. So you got to be careful on
what's
how they
the
do
incentive? That. What's the incentive to schedule, a tough non-conference?
Right. If you're going to get in,
and should we even have a non-conference? Even though that would,
I think they should do away with conference,
but you got 20 teams in each conference.
In 5 years, there won't be a non-conference. It'll be just a mega conference. So
I think they should do away with conference championships. Personally, I think for one, that extra game, like Ohio State didn't play in it, so they did have it a little extra week, but they did still have to play the first round with no bye. But there's you can go back and forth on that, but I still think with this system and scheduling or seeding, you can't just take into account, like you said, Raj, make them not even count towards anything, the conference championship game, just because you win your conference. And it may be, weak and you don't necessarily deserve that bye in the first round.
Let's talk quickly, Tom, your opinion and perspective on the actual national championship game. I was able to watch both teams close and up front. And I knew Notre Dame, and being without Riley Mills, their All-American defensive tackle, who's just a beast. I always bring it back to USC in the past, and because that's all I've got. But Pete Carroll, he goes straight for the trenches first, and Notre Dame is outstanding up front. Ohio State outstanding up front. Michigan dominant up front last year. I knew it would be competitive. What were your thoughts on the game? Because I personally thought that even though it would kind of tee things off, I really liked the backup Agnelli, even though his delivery was kind of a drop-down elbow. Riley Leonard was so one-dimensional. I was a bit surprised Notre Dame came back. Were you surprised as well? Did you think Ohio State was going to run away with it?
Well, the thing about it for me was not having Jeremiah Love healthy on the field. I think that really changed the game plan that Notre Dame was going to go in with. But I like the fact that you look at second quarter, the game was over. You just, not to sugarcoat it, the game was over. Ohio State was dominant. And Notre Dame went into halftime, and I absolutely love Marcus Freeman. Like Brandon said, the guy is a motivator. When you have the response that went viral when the team found out he got the head coaching job, that just tells you what kind of a person this guy is. Not human being, coach aside. I mean, you got to love that.
And he's half Korean. I got to say to my boy Charles Kim, he is half Korean, and his wife is super hot. Not that matters. He
didn't let his team feel like they were never not in that game, and they made a valiant comeback. And the reality is, Leonard was probably concussed. Let's not sugarcoat it. He was concussed, And I think his game really relied on his legs, and he never really had developed the passing game like he had in Duke the year prior. Yeah. So it's frustrating. But when your best weapon is not really available at 100%, that just changes a lot of things. But, when Ohio State needed to get a big play, they did. Abuka was lights out. Trevion Henderson who is one of my favorite players in the country. The kid is just 100% great person off the football field. I mean, going back to that Michigan game, everyone was talking shit about everybody, and Henderson was like, man, that was a great game. Good team win for Michigan. I wish him the best. And just a good, solid human being. So he stepped up. And he stepped up big time in the last 2 weeks of that season. So when they needed something, they made it happen. And Will Howard really kind of made a name for himself. I think there was a big question mark on his head as far as is he a championship caliber quarterback? And he made some big time throws. And I think he got himself at least a second round draft in this coming draft. So I like the fact that when the game you thought was over, it wasn't really over. So it kept you engaged, and ultimately Ohio State goes away with the win. Big Ten for life, back-to-back Big Ten championships, more to come.
Well, that's interesting. We'll transition there. And
hold on, I got one thing to say real quick.
Yeah. Knock it out, bro.
Sorry about that. So, yes, the game was over in the second quarter, and then we proceeded to play like we did against Michigan and try and keep a lead instead of just putting the foot on the gas and just ending the game. Like, we could have scored 52 points if we wanted to. They started doing these quarterback
not to lose
like,
versus
what are we doing? And that's why it made me I was like, here's Michigan all over again. Like, here's what we're doing. Like, what are you guys doing? And then finally, when we had to have it, they throw the ball to who else? Number 4. Just throw the ball to 4. That's all you got to do.
I'm old, but he reminded me of the most dominant freshman receiver since Big Mike Williams at USC. Just in terms of like taking a team and making big plays. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad the over hit personally. That was pretty rad. But yeah, like I said, it was we were transitioning there that I had posed this to a lot of our friends that are SEC guys, Tennessee guys out here. And I asked them if the effect of the portal, and more specifically, the effect of the NIL, has ended or will end SEC dominance. Now, I know the Big Ten has gone back-to-back with 2 great teams and rivals in Michigan and Ohio State, and the irony is overwhelming. Although Michigan did win both big games and won 4 in a row. Sorry, Chain, that's all they got. I'm used to that feeling. But Bama, is the dynasty era over? Is my question. Not just about the SEC. We'll start there. Is it just going to be about who's got the most money and the least amount of perspective, where collectives are just going to throw money at kids? But let's go to the SEC first. Is that dominance over? Yes or no? Chain.
Yeah, it's over. The NIL and transfer portal have completely leveled the playing field per SEC, right? So now you're getting a lot more or a lot less depth in the SEC, and you're going to see a lot more of those, 4 and 3-star players that were backups now starting and actually doing something on other teams. So, yeah, it's over. And who's to say it's not going to stay in the Big Ten forever either? I think it's going to go back and forth and around because there's no system like the SEC built with this NFL fast track. Like, you come here, you sit 2 years, you play 1 year, you go to the NFL. Like, that was the playbook. That's changed. And again, yeah, the Big Ten, I think they were 9-1 in bowl games this year against the SEC. that hardly ever happened. That hadn't happened in, last I can remember. But that's going to change. I mean, the SEC, they'll bounce back. They'll still get their fair share, but there's no dominant conference anymore. Right now, yes, the Big Ten is, but I don't think that'll be for long either. I think that's going to change as well, just because of the portal and NIL.
I was talking to a friend that is affiliated with USC program and a booster, and he said that Lincoln Riley had mentioned to their group that every player it's a bidding war for that's in the portal. And, at Ohio State, in Georgia, and Clemson before that, they went 3 deep in 5 stars, and those kids were willing to wait 2 years for their moment. Now they want to play right away and get paid. Yeah. Is that going to be what it looks like? Because, Judkins is an amazing player. He was amazing at Ole Miss. If he stays there, they're in the playoffs, I think. And, I'm not saying he left for the money. He went and he said why, and I believe him. He went to that program for specific reasons. But is it just going to be, a bidding war and thereby change? And, people that want to win more than next year are just going to pony up more.
100%. And you're seeing that even with high school kids. Take, for example, Bryce Underwood here. Bryce Underwood played at Belleville, owns almost every state record in the state of Michigan as a quarterback. We all know his story. Committed to UCLA or Oregon, and then decommitted. I think originally he was at UCLA, decommitted, went to transferred to Oregon, not transferred, but he committed to Oregon, pulled that, goes to LSU, and then big time boosters at Michigan get involved. And now he's at Michigan, signs a contract, literally signed a contract, a 4-year contract. So the kid can't leave. If he wants his money, he can't leave. So, but therein lies the problem. There's talk that, well, he's got a really good shot at being, day one starter. This kid's going to be the starting quarterback at Michigan. There's no question. And Jaden Davis, who was their big recruit the last year, who had every opportunity to get on the football field this year and prove himself, didn't, because his parents didn't want him to. He's still at Michigan. He didn't hit the transfer portal. He's staying at Michigan. And that surprises me, because these kids really, they have the mindset that if I'm not playing this year, I'm leaving. I'm going to go to where I'm going to play. So that just changes the dynamic of college football. Ultimately, like you're not going to be able to develop a lot of kids unless you get a system like they're doing at Michigan. Like you want this money. I mean, I think it was like a $7.5 million deal. It's a 4-year deal. I mean, I think outside of him, going into the NFL after, his second or third year, that'll change that. But you're going to start to see these schools signing contracts with players, and I just think it cheapens the sport, in my opinion. The traditions are going to be out the window, and you're going to have the same, core teams that, let's face it,
willing to pony up for the money.
Like I said, yeah, you're going to have the
irony being SMU and Dickerson
and Texas A&M, that oil money. That's all going to come into play, and it's just going to make it hard for the smaller schools to compete. And I just fear that college football is going to, suffer for it long term.
I agree, man. It's no longer about the education. And my chip on my shoulder is that in Los Angeles, a lot of the USC, like just crazy money guys, are pissed. And they, sometimes there is less to be involved in where there's a lot of old money in the South or other areas, so to speak, and those guys are willing to spend the money, and maybe others aren't. Like, screw it. Why am I going to do this? And then who's going to, take control of chain? I'm sure you're familiar with the foundation, the Ohio State Collective. They seem to have things right. I don't really know why or whatnot, but is it just a bidding war? Is there going to be any reliance on things like tradition or whatnot? Or eventually are we going to see, some billionaire tech Boise State alum spend the money to get everybody to go there?
I think that really comes down to the player himself, right? Like when you are looking for a school and looking to play, like what is your actual, order of importance? And are you about tradition? Are you trying to learn? Are you wanting to study under this coach and get better? Or are you just looking to get paid as soon as possible? And I think this is still in its infant stage, and there's so many directions it could go from here. Obviously, they're going to have to do something with some type of salary cap or limit transfers in the transfer portal. They've got a lot of work to do. They just unrolled this thing with no laws, no regulations whatsoever.
Typical NCAA, and it starts with football, and then you're going to have other sports, and we'll have issues of equality and whatnot. And it's Matthew Sluka left UNLV at the time they were undefeated, the quarterback, and he left when they were 4-0, and he left his team and everyone, and it was because he said he was promised a deal worth $500,000. So now you're starting to see contracts, and eventually come lawsuits, and it's just such a slippery slope that it's really it frightens me. And
to the school's defense, who's paying the NIL money, like you want that security in a contract. Like, hey, you can't transfer, you can't do this, or you can't just say, all right, here's $7 million, come to play for me. They come 1 year and then they're gone. Like, no, you've got to have some type of regulation, and I think the schools are starting to smarten up to that and take it into their own hands. But it should have been set forth from the NCAA to begin with, which they're asinine. So
they're powerless, and I think it's snowballed, and I don't know what it's going to take for things to change, but now it's definitely a money game, which is absolutely frightening. Let's go to it's kind of funny. Back in the day, USC guys didn't always do great in the pros, and people would say, well, they've been coached up and that's why. But other people said, well, when they went to the NFL, they took a pay cut. So speaking,
Brock Purdy still doesn't make $1 million a year.
What's that?
I said Brock Purdy still doesn't make $1 million a year.
Exactly.
All these college kids.
You're gonna
he
see
will
that.
this year.
That's no doubt. But that's my transition to the NFL, which we normally start with. But it's you wonder if some of the Buffalo Bills, like Dalton Kincaid, wasn't playing up to par because of a pay cut from Utah. So that the Church of the Latter-day Saints money. But I digress. Let's go straight into that game. Kansas City and Buffalo. Tom, did Kansas City win that game, or did Buffalo lose that game?
I think Kansas City took advantage of a lot of missed opportunities that Buffalo gave them. Early on in that game, Josh Allen looked like Josh Allen of old, throwing across his body, trying to force throws in. He was everything he hadn't been all season. And they tried to force the passing game when James Cook was eating the Chiefs' defensive line up. He was getting yards. They went away for, just like the Lions did against Washington, where Jahmyr Gibbs only had 16 carries. Cook, they stopped giving him the ball. It was successful. So I think it's a combination of, questionable play calling. I think Allen had a lot of pressure on his shoulders, being 0-3 all time in the playoffs against Mahomes and the Chiefs. I think he tried to really force a lot of plays. But on the flip side, I'm not blaming the refs in this, but there was that situation at the end of the game where I think Kincaid had the third down catch. That was a first down.
See, I thought his left elbow hit a little early.
I don't know.
I also think with that, I blame Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator, for a million things. Like you said, 13 carries, but you run a tight end screen on 3rd and 3. Like, just what are you doing?
Here's my other beef with that. Josh Allen is infamous for taking the snap and going off left tackle. It's no secret. It didn't work once. It didn't work twice. It didn't work 3 times. Why do you think it was going to work the 4th time? And it did, but it didn't. It was too close to call. It was a coin flip. It was a Gene Steratore card gate back in the day when he had to pull out the card to see if it would. Oh my God, that will never ever live down. But he continued to go off tackle. It wasn't going to work, and it didn't work, and it cost him. So I think Joe Brady may have cost himself a head coaching job, and I'm really surprised that they retained him in Buffalo. But I think it comes down to the Chiefs know how to win when they need to win, and having that home field advantage at Arrowhead made a big difference. And nobody looked great. I don't think Mahomes looked great. Kelsey, two receptions, yet he's on the stage hooting and hollering and singing. I don't understand that, but ultimately it came down
to me on a prop bet.
They made more plays, and I think Buffalo just tried to force too much, and they didn't get the type of pressure like Rousseau and Milano. They made a lot of stupid penalties. They made a lot of dumb decisions that cost them. And you can't give the Chiefs an inch because they were going to take advantage of it, and they did. And that's why they're playing next weekend.
Brandon, I thought, well, let's just go straight to it. Dalton Kincaid, the 1st-round pick, number 25 overall. Can we just go ahead and put the blame on that dude? Like, how do you not make that catch?
You can always point to one play, and it's one of the last ones you saw to make them lose the game. But it was, like Tom said, it was collective throughout the entire game. There's several plays you could point to that could have been a huge turning point in the game. With that said, bottom line is all that out the window. Josh Allen had the ball in his hands and had a chance to come down and tie the game, and didn't do so. If you give Patrick Mahomes the ball in that same situation,
3 minutes, it's over.
He wins the game.
Well,
so
a lot of people argue that was a first down when he did. Yeah, he had 11 carries for 39 yards. I think 4, 5, or 6 of them were no gain. And like you said, just the arrogance of going off left tackle. I hate Joe Brady. So I think he's a moron. And he went from LSU with Burrow and Chase and Jefferson and Lacey and Edwards-Helaire when he was dominant. Ironically enough, a Kansas City Chief, and suddenly fell off the map. But to Carolina, then he goes to Carolina as an offensive coordinator for like a 3-win team to the Bills. And whether it be that tight end screen, there was another wide receiver screen to the short side of the field to Amari Cooper, where Shakir, who's like a T-Rex, he's like 5'3", was the lead blocker. And, the right tackle had to go all the way out there. That was on 3rd and 10. And then, they had a play down at the goal line from the 4-yard line where they did like a fade against McDuffie, who's a 1st and 2nd team All-Pro. I was like, what the hell are they doing? I thought Buffalo was as much to blame because of the play calling.
Yeah, for sure.
Than anything.
They totally could have won that game. Like Tom said, Kansas City did nothing special. They didn't make a ton of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some questionable play calls that went in their favor, which it always seems to. I'm not going to get into that, but you throw those out the window, it's still they, they would have won the game. But again, Josh Allen has this complex or something in his head every time he gets that chance, and he, like you said, he looks like a completely different player than how he played all year. He puts so much pressure on himself. He's playing tight. He's trying to force everything. And it sucks because I love Josh Allen. I want him, to win a Super Bowl because he's one of our great quarterbacks we've seen in a generation. But it just sucks. It's kind of like Ryan Day against Michigan. Just can't get over that damn hump.
True. I tell you another thing that cost Buffalo. Mac Hollins was having probably his biggest game in his career.
Dude, don't get me started. I was trying to get that prop in.
And they just did not get him the ball enough. Outside of like Shakir, Amari Cooper.
Dude, he was their offense.
Yes. And
on deep routes, it's like a big tight end, really. And, it says a lot about Kincaid, who I'm not going to go into his history, why I've never been a fan, but, he's sub-optimal and
Did he get like a game-winning touchdown against USC a couple of years ago, maybe?
USC, perhaps? I was not going to get into that, but USC is the reason why Buffalo lost, because he went off in that game. Queethy was Travis Queethy, I think his name was. He was the starter. He just kept getting hurt. He was an All-American. Kincaid went off on a crap USC defense, and he becomes a first-round pick because Buffalo's got, in a 2 tight end set, they got Dawson Knox, a consummate blocking tight end. I mean,
where was he? Where was he?
I mean, I think Kincaid is what he can do is catch the ball and turn up field. And we didn't see him in the schemes.
Ty Johnson, who was a big part of that offense, late in the season, he was non-existent. And
exactly, Ray Davis had 1 play and he fumbled, and he had 2 carries actually, but he was out. So
just the pressure that team, the coaches, they can't prepare the players enough. They just can't handle the big game pressure, and that is their hump. They have the talent, and I thought they were a better team this year than Kansas City personally, but they just cannot get over that hump. They put too much pressure on themselves.
Yeah.
It's crazy, though. You guys talked about Kansas City and the big play, and as somebody that usually loves props, and, Matt Collins was 1.5 catches, or it might have been 1, and his yardage was like 15. And I was trying to get it in just because of Raider bias, but Kansas City, Xavier Worthy was the leading pass receiver, which isn't crazy, but Juju was next at 60 yards with 2 catches. Then Hollywood Brown out of nowhere on that first drive. They were throwing it all over the place.
Yeah.
They set the tone. And then comes Kelsey with 2 catches. They just, at will. And to me, it comes down to coaching and play calling. And I'm going to go straight from that, even though we haven't really talked about the NFC Championship game, into a brief. We're going to do a Super Bowl preview, folks, I think, and we've had a lot of people asking about that. But is it just stop questioning the Chiefs, not only because of Mahomes and Chris Jones, but because of Andy Reid and Spagnuolo and that coaching staff? Should we just not even bother at this point?
I think it's more Spagnuolo now. Their offense has not been Chief-esque, we'll say, this year. What was the point differential? Was 5 points, I think, ultimately all year, which was incredible. You take a 15-2 team. Compared to the Lions, I think the Lions were it was like plus 170, plus 180-ish, and you saw what happened to them. They're not playing. But this team turned a page when they brought Spagnuolo in here. And he's a perfect example of which I think the Bears are going to have this conversation here in 2 or 3 years. Not all coordinators are good head coaches, because Spagnuolo was not a good head coach at all. You put him on the sidelines as the DC, he's fantastic. Robert Saleh, same situation. So
Wade Phillips, I can go back because I'm old, but yeah.
I think this team relied so much on their offense and what Mahomes could bring in his electricity and the excitement. Well, you get so much game tape on a kid. Defenses are going to start to pick up on that. Don't get me wrong; he still will beat the living daylights out of you. But starting last year, they needed their defense to step up, and their defense carried them last year, and their defense has carried them this year. So I think this is 100% Spagnuolo led team. The Walrus, as you call him, perfect nickname. He's the reason why it's hard to not like the Chiefs, because he's just such a good dude, Andy Reid. But the bottom line, in my opinion, is Chris Jones, when he's not crying his eyes out on the sidelines for whatever reason, I don't know. It's not like he hasn't been there 5 times at the Super Bowl. Their defense, McDuffie in the backfield, they're strong, and their defense is definitely the reason why they're playing next week. So that's my thinking is they had to reinvent themselves after, prior to last year, and they did it. And here we go. There's another Super Bowl.
They're like a college football program, right? Like the Patriots were.
That's exactly what I was about to say. This is nothing but the Bill Belichick playbook. You got a star QB who can make any wide receiver look good, and you put any type of defense that is in the top 10 or 15 in the league, you're going to win some games. And then Andy Reid knows how to coach. When he gets in these situations, he calls great plays, and they win always. Patrick Mahomes, like I said, if he ever has the ball and he's 2 minutes left and he's got to go down and score to win, bet your life on it. He's going to go down and score and win. So, but yeah, it does remind me of, Tom Brady's teams where you just had a bunch of bozos out there and a great defense, and they won Super Bowls, man. So it's the same deal.
I love the word bozo. While I got you, let's quickly, what was Philly? Philly was, I think, a 6.5 point favorite. I like that game. By the way, rookie quarterbacks were 0-5, now 0-6 all time in championship games. But I didn't see, I think the over was like 49 or 48. I did not see almost 90 points being scored. Tom, did you think the Eagles were going to roll them, or did you think Jaden Daniels and the Commanders were going to show up and this would be a tighter game?
I thought it was going to be a little bit more competitive. What I witnessed the week prior, which may have been, I was telling the guys last week, top 3 most depressing Detroit sports moment in my life. Number 1 being the 2005 NBA Finals, Game 6, when Rasheed Wallace decided to double the inbounder instead of leaving Robert Horry wide open to hit the game-winning 3. And then the second would have been the 2009 NHL Finals, Game 7, here in Detroit versus Pittsburgh. Had to watch Sidney Crosby hoist the cup. You want to talk about misery. So this falls into that category. This is definitely number 3. But from what I saw that week, I mean, I saw a kid that the lights weren't too bright, and you just don't see that with rookie quarterbacks. He made all the throws. He took off running when he needed to. Cool and collected. Just absolutely everything you want in a quarterback, and he's a rookie. So I think it came down to Philly knew what they had to do. They had to contain him. And Philly's front defense is undoubtedly the best in football. Those big Georgia boys up front are incredible.
They're the number 1 defense in the league.
And when you have when you have that pass rush, you have that ability to stop the run and get at the quarterback. That makes your secondary that much better. So they had a good game plan going in. Playing in Philly, it's a raucous area, place to play. It's very hostile. I think it caught up to them. I mean, let's look at the facts. He goes into Tampa, albeit it's Tampa, but still, your rookie, your first playoff game on the road, you go in and win big time. You need to make a play in the end of the fourth quarter. You make it, and you win. Brings it to Detroit, which some would argue is the most hostile environment. I tend to beg to differ.
I would not. It's the loudest. That's for damn
it's
sure.
loud. It's loud, but nonetheless, you go in against the number 1 seed, 15-2, and he played like, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to go out and they did. They controlled that game. So you thought that
you guys talked about this when you have 11 guys. The fact that Glenn was able to get them to be that competitive with
16
off the practice squad,
16 guys on the defensive side of the ball on the IR. So I'm not making excuses, but that is a big role. But I think the bottom line for Philly was contain Jaden Daniels, and I'm going to throw some shade at probably my favorite player, probably my favorite player in the last 10 years. And yes, he's from the University of Michigan, Mike Sainristil, who had 2 picks against my Lions, unbelievable at Michigan. And he's had a great season, rookie season here at Washington. He was a huge liability. Now, I don't blame all that on him, because you cannot put a 5'9" corner on A.J. Brown, who's 6'4", 6'2", 6'3", something like that. It was a mismatch, and they kept putting him on A.J. Brown, and that was easy. That was pitch and catch. So I think the defensive schemes for Washington kind of cost them. Love Mikey Sainristil. Actually got a Mikey Michigan jersey and a Commanders jersey that's going to be hanging up here in the speakeasy soon. So, but I got to throw shade when I have to. He played a really bad game. He gave up, and he had some really costly penalties. So, but this is a young team. I think the Washington will soon to be Redskins again are going to be back in the conversation next year.
You got to pay your dues in sports, in baseball, in basketball, and that generally involves, like the Lions did last year. You just couldn't predict these injuries this year, but losing a heartbreaker. And you learn from that. And they're definitely going to be around with that core. I personally, De'Ami Brown was my guy. 5 catches, 6 catches prior. He fumbled on that one play. His over-under was 3.5 catches, and yardage was like 45, actually. We had a 4-leg parlay, and he ended up with 42. So I needed 3.5 yards. My buddy and I, we went in. It was like $500, $600, $700, whatever it was. And it was not a huge bet, and it came down to that guy. And after he fumbled, but to your point, Ertz's over-under on receptions was like 3 also. He ended up with 11, and I thought he was going to die for 104. They kept everything in front of them. Brandon, this is going to be a tougher question because I'm transitioning to the Super Bowl.
This one being 20.
Is there a way? It seems to me that it would be easier for the Chiefs to load up the box and limit what Saquon, his 2,000 yards. The guy, by the way, had 15 for 118 in this game. But is it easier to scheme for the Eagles than it is for the Chiefs? Because I would argue that Eagles in the coming Super Bowl, folks, have more talent top to bottom than the Kansas City Chiefs. Am I right or am I wrong?
No, I think you're 100% right. Talent-wise, individually, they definitely have more than the Chiefs do, especially on the offensive side. But the Chiefs have Mahomes and they have Hurts. So, in my opinion, if I was a DC, I would pressure the hell out of Hurts. Obviously, try and limit Saquon, but make Hurts beat you with his arm because he is prone to mistakes. If he's got pressure, he'll throw interception and make bad plays, take a sack, hold on to the ball too long. So, yeah, you've got to really force him and you've got to pressure him throughout the game. And that's how you win this game because if he has time in the pocket, he will make accurate throws, and you will see Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown and Goddard and even Saquon out of the backfield. I mean, they have weapons everywhere. It's just it all comes down to Hurts.
I agree entirely, and
Kansas City has to make him throw the ball.
Mm-hmm.
I think
that's exactly
too.
And I was going to ask you, Tom, that the line opened up at, I believe, at 1.5, and it hasn't moved in a week.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually tells us that people aren't quite sure because the Philly team.
Early. It's early still.
It is early, but usually the public will jump on something. And that Philly team looked so dominant in that.
I'll give you 2 words. 2 words why. Ready? Saquon Barkley. That's it. What he has done this year and what he did last week and what he did the week before, it's just when you think you've got him stopped, he breaks for 40. He breaks for 50. The guy's incredible. Yeah. And he's got the biggest chip on his shoulder than any player I've ever seen in my life. He's got a bone to pick, and he wants to win this thing. And he's proven that he's durable for the first time in his career. And he probably would have ended up with the rushing record if played in Week 18. But kudos to him for putting teams.
With an extra game, but still.
Sure. But still, he had over 2,000, and it was within reach. Okay. And yeah, I just think when you have him healthy, it's scary. And that's a nightmare for a lot of defenses because you start keying on that. And Hurts has the ability to beat you with his arm. He hasn't really shown it a whole lot, but he has that ability. So I think with having Saquon Barkley on your side, that's going to keep a line within striking distance, I think, for the Eagles.
So you're saying striking distance. You know what? Let's just go into. I was gonna allow. Do you guys have your own bet your nuts, or are we gonna go? I was just gonna go off the Super Bowl. Although I usually go props. So
I mean, there's nothing else to really bet right now. So.
We're gonna go deep. We'll go deep dive into it next week, but we can kind of like.
I can still do bet. Yeah.
Tickle the taint a little bit, so to speak. Little scratch the surface of what we think might happen.
Let's do that. Let's go into bet your nuts. Brief Super Bowl tease.
A brief tease.
It's time for Bet Your Nuts.
All right, folks, we're going to go way more in depth in this. I'm a big prop guy. I can tell you guys that usually have lower numbers in terms. Noah Gray will be 1 or 2 catches. There always seems to be a David Tyree-esque guy that comes out of nowhere. Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith. On the Philly side, Kenneth Gainwell. There's going to be guys that are going to make plays. So I'm not going to go further into that just for the folks at home. The Chiefs are still a 1.5 point favorite, and Brandon, it's still 48.5. Is that the over?
1 second here. It is 48.5. Yes.
All right. I'm going to go straight to you guys. Brandon, since I'm talking to you now, what are you going to go with? Are you going with a prop, or we're just going straight since we're teasing here, not literally?
Yeah. So I love this bet. it's almost a guarantee because there's not a ton of weapons on the offense for the Kansas City Chiefs. So I like anytime touchdown, Xavier Worthy. It's plus 150 right now.
It is?
Love that bet.
Damn.
Love that bet.
Who else is going to score? Yeah.
Well, most people are probably looking at Travis Kelce to score, but as we've seen this year, he's on his way out. And if they win the Super Bowl, I think he retires.
I think he retires anyways.
Probably, but especially if they win the Super Bowl. But he's just he doesn't do much, but he does show up when he has to and when he's
the game before.
He looks overweight too, out of shape.
Yeah, he's been flying on private jets and partying too much. So yeah.
He's been shaking it off with Taylor, but he's not that way.
Thank God Rob's not
concert.
Please don't do that.
I do think there was a over-under was 3 times that they showed Taylor Swift last week, and I think it ended up being like 6 or 7. Even when Mahomes made a play, they showed Taylor Swift. Brittany was doing over that because they never once showed Brittany until after I didn't even know she was there until she ended up on the field.
Exactly.
She just spat out another kid, so I didn't think she'd be there.
God, she sucks. Like in terms of like when she opens her mouth, I'm just like, oh, God, it's miserable. Yeah, in Kelsey's defense here, he did have a big game the week prior. It just seems like Kansas City, unlike Ohio State, was lucky this year to lose that game and still be able to play for it, because in years past they may not have had that chance.
Absolutely.
Kansas City turned it on, it seems like. Now they weren't like last year. Would they have like 4 losses, 5? Oh my God. This year they only had 2. But Kelsey is a guy that he's only 35. He still had 97 catches, 823 yards, but only 3 TDs in the regular season. But yeah, Philly is not a great matchup for him per se, but he had 7 for 118 against Houston the week before, 117 and a TD. So I'm going to go to you real quick, Tom, before you get into yours. Kelsey, which one are we going to see against Philadelphia? Because it seems to me that the Chiefs will need him to beat this Philadelphia Eagles team.
You're going to look at the Chiefs running quick outs, 3-step drops, because they can't afford to let that defensive front of the Eagles get loose. And what's going to work? Kelsey's going to sneak inside, kind of get into the zone, into the soft zone. He's going to find a hole. That's his bread and butter. Mm-hmm. And they're going to rely on that. And they're going to need that if they want to be successful, because Mahomes is going to be forced out of the pocket a lot if he holds on to that ball too long. And, Philly has shown, and if they're going to put Braun kind of as the linebacker, he's going to kind of be the spy. So I don't know if he's going to be able to get off necessarily with his legs. So I think this is definitely a game where Kelsey could have 7-8 receptions here. Just when they need a big play, they need a quick 5 yards. That's the guy. And let's face it, they're comfortable together. This is nothing new for them. This is their bread and butter. So I fully expect Kelsey to be a big piece of that offensive puzzle for the Chiefs.
Especially if this is his last game, and those players probably already know that decision. Like, he's selling out for this. Like, doesn't matter if he blows an ACL or he's selling out for this thing.
Yep.
Well, him and Mahomes can play together blindfolded. And I wonder his loyalty to Mahomes in the sense that Kansas City is not the same team, and he's not the same guy without him. A Hall of Fame tight end, obviously. Straight after Tony Gonzalez. Nice job, Kansas City. One of the best talent evaluators, them and the Patriots ever. But the retirement thing I didn't think about, but I guess we'll have to see. But Tom, what is your bet your nuts pick for the Super Bowl as we tease this one?
So Cliff Notes theater or Cliff Notes version. I don't know why I said theater. That's weird. I don't know. Like I said, we'll get a little bit more in depth next week
Michigan.
with the actual game. But looking at this one, like I mentioned, Hurts is going to have to use his arm, and he's capable. He's got weapons. Devontae Smith has kind of been suspect a little bit in these playoffs. He really hasn't had
haven't shown up for a guy with that kind of speed.
You don't think and like Kelsey's going to play a cog. I think Dallas Goedert's going to play a big role too. So I'm looking at Jalen Hurts 200+ yards passing. Saquon Barkley anytime touchdown.
What are the odds on that one, though? They can't
fly, Eagles, fly. Money line, plus 375 right now.
Oh.
So
I love it. I can't wait to get into that next week.
Yeah, I mean, my opinions might change, but I just this is a rematch Super Bowl. And Philly was at the precipice of winning 2 years ago, and they're going to have that on the back of their mind. And even though I think Nick Sirianni is the most cringe and punchable face in the NFL, I think they're going to find a way to get it done. And that pains me to say, but I know Brandon's shaking his head, but I just can't. I want somebody different. I'm sick of it.
I want to see a three-peat. I do. First in the NFL. Come on.
I mean, as a Raider fan,
it's historic. I know you guys disagree, and that's totally fine. I'm just saying, my wife's whole family's from Kansas City, so I have ties.
You have a rooting
like my second team.
Hey, I've got Patrick Mahomes' Texas Tech jersey hanging in the rafters here, so
yeah,
I got to give credit where credit's due.
I just love to see it, for all of my extended family.
But is it good for the NFL? Do you think this game's going to be poorly rated? Because all indications are,
I don't think
I've talked to, social media has said nobody. I saw a poll today. Well, will you watch the Super Bowl? It's a holiday for me. I have 5 screens and a 120-inch projector in this garage. It's on. I'm watching no matter what. So I voted yes. Unanimously was no. I mean, and we're talking like 6,000 votes in this poll, and it was like 63% no. And I was shocked by that. But ultimately, I think those people are just a little bitter and butthurt. And
it's the same thing. Like, I'm not a Patriots fan. I got tired of watching them in the Super Bowl and seeing them win. Like, I get it. I totally get it. I mean, you want to see somebody new, the younger group come up and somebody new win it. But
see my Lions get a Super Bowl.
It is a 5-hour obligation, and you go to a party and you bring this, and then it turns into 7-8 hours. Of course, we will watch, but I can see
I'll be podcasting. I'll be podcasting pregame, so even better.
Nice, dude.
I might. I'll be flying home from Vegas, but I should be back by like 3. So I'll make Super Bowl time.
Well, like I said, folks, we're going to get into the Super Bowl more next week. I just wanted to see where we all stood. I'll probably be the obvious one and take the over. I have not seen the props, but Shane, it sounds like you like Kansas City. I mean, your props were outstanding, but you like Kansas City in this game to cover the 1.5.
Yeah, I mean 1.5. You might as well just put money line on it.
It might as well be like pick 'em at this point.
I'd take the money line. I mean 1.5. What's 1.5? It's minus another 10 points or whatever on the juice. So whatever you want to do.
Which is also why that plus 375 you said was like, whoa, like that's
for their money line. Yeah, I mean
that's quite a bit, but.
I don't even hate hedging that a little bit, throw in a big
There's
no Kansas City money line and a little bit on the plus 370. Why not?
If you want to make any money on this game, you're going to have to parlay it because there's no money to be made. The only plus is
prop bets.
Is Eagles money line. They're plus 110 right now. Yeah. Everything else is minus. And so it's
all that stuff is if you're trying to make a quick lick, you need to do parlay or you need to look at the prop bets.
Gatorade color going to be? I mean, make your money on that.
or how long the national anthem goes.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. Yeah. I'm never taking the over ever again because I got burned on that last year.
Yeah. The fact they all know this thing, it's all a conspiracy.
We'll get into that next week. Fun props. The what the F props we'll call it next week. We'll get into it.
Stoked on that. Let's go straight into final words.
Minus Robbie Davis, who's probably 14 sheets to the wind at this point, wherever he's at.
I mean, he wakes up 14 sheets to the wind.
That's true. That's true.
Friend's birthday party.
First, of course, and he's 40, so that's always a big thing, right? Like, we party hard when we're 40.
I'm 40. I'm a man. Greatest quote of all time.
Mike Gundy, Oklahoma State. Yes.
Fuck me. I'm a man. I'm 40. Greatest.
It is.
I mean, that is the greatest quote of all time.
You got playoffs with Jim Mora, Dennis.
Yeah,
Green,
it's pretty good.
They are who we thought they were. And then what's his name had one? Didn't Herm have multiple? I know he says don't hit send when it comes to like social media, but
and then you had the old coach of the
Gary Glanville said the NFL stands for not for long when you make calls like that.
The Vikings coach. They are who they thought we were. They are who they thought we were.
That's the Dennis Green one.
Dennis Green.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ultimate.
I can go all day on those things, but the one thing I'm going to say is, I was going to Peacock to watch the USC women and Juju Smith, who is Juju Watkins, who's the smoothest player I've seen in a long time. But on Peacock, there is fireaidla.org, hosted by Billy Crystal, which, for those of us that go back, Live Aid and the comedy, why can't I think of the name that was on HBO every year where he and
Farm Aid or Live Aid?
Farm Aid. No, they didn't. It'll come to me. I'm sorry, I'm old. But just an amazing event, Alanis Morissette, Billie Eilish, you name it. It's fireaidla.org. And this, of course, is in reference to the fires that were unprecedented in Los Angeles, California, and Southern California. They were unprecedented because of the Santa Ana winds, which happened quite a bit.
Comic relief.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Whoopi Goldberg, Billy Crystal, and the third host was Robin Williams. Rest in peace.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to get into why this fire occurred. It was unprecedented in where it occurred, especially in the Palisades. But also, I was talking to a very good friend of mine who says, we're good. And then this was near the Eaton fire in Altadena, California. He was like, yeah, a small thing popped up, but they told us we're okay. Within 15 minutes, they got an emergency alert. Everyone evacuate. On his block, they lost 5 houses. It's almost like if you look at the street in between the fingers, like this house was gone and his was here and it survived. And another friend, his home is about a mile away, technically in Pasadena, very good friend. They had to leave their houses not knowing what they would come back to. And they were both shocked they were still there. On top of that, it was the movie Outbreak afterwards with the National Guard because people were going in houses trying to take things, and it's a dog-eat-dog world. But over 50,000 acres, 16,000 structures in an area where, it's not just the rebuilding. I think you can write a thesis on this, but most importantly, 28 souls lost their life. I had a friend that told me that, he would see dogs and cats, people's animals running in the street, that we're trying to stay alive and people couldn't keep them with them. It was just such a panic that happened suddenly. And, there were over 100 yards or 500 yards. The fire could spread within like a minute to few minutes, whatever the statistic may be. My mom and sister live in an area in Orange County. So many people I know, but to watch it personally affect people is one thing, but it's not about that. It's just about, this is absolutely devastating. And a friend of mine he never calls me Raj, and he's like, I have 48 nicknames, but he's like, dude, Raj, I've never seen anything like this. It's just total devastation and destruction. Just nothing. Like nothing is there. It's just ash, and it's insane. And right now he's dealing with insurance companies and everything. But the point is, these are people where insurance companies were unilaterally canceling fire policies. So people think, oh, the Palisades, they have money. Not anymore. There's so many people out there that have lost everything. And I don't know what's going to happen long term. You know, my buddy's kid doesn't go to school there, but his neighbor lost his house. His kid's school burned down. The closest 2 grocery stores burned down. The gas station burned down, and the public library burned down.
So what's the point of going back?
That's just it right there. You know, what's next? You know, right now we're temporary housing and staying with different people, but I don't know what the long term, especially in this age of remote living, you know, it's the long term. There's just so much uncertainty, which is why it is so important to donate. Like I said, fireaidla.org. There's also a phone number where you can text a link. I wrote it out, but then I realized it would probably show up backwards. No, it doesn't.
No, it's right. Yeah.
It's 310-359-0579. That's 310-359-0579. And it's an organized, if you text that number, you can get a link where you can donate. Because it at first people were like, are you going to start a GoFundMe for my friend and other friends that were affected? And, you know, I think there's just a lot of uncertainty. People don't realize how devastated the areas are, and just the entire infrastructure gone. And it's just like a nuclear bomb went off, really. So fireaidla.org. I can't stress that enough, because insurance policies, everything are just getting canceled and people are left with nothing. And I have no idea what's going to happen there. Brandon?
Yeah, that's awful. Our, you know, prayers have been with them, those families, everybody that lost everything. That's just absolutely terrible. I can't imagine what they're going through. So, yeah, please donate. Like Raj said, do what you can and help these people out. Hard to follow that. I was going on.
We usually have Tom go last because he says the weighty things. And
yeah, mine was going to be more of a comic relief segment.
Well, let's do that, because I think that's important, especially between Tom and I, because Tom has the meaningful things.
Yeah. So, all right. And I'm sure you guys have all seen this meme, but after the national championship, Ryan Day, Will Howard, and a couple other guys were riding along on this golf cart trying to get to the press conference. And they're whipping around, and we've got, I don't know if this person has ever driven a golf cart in their life, but they go through the tunnel, and she manages to wreck the golf cart into the sidewall. So we've got to have a better vetting process on these drivers. I think it was an attempted injury going on here. There was speculation that she is from Michigan. She was a Michigan grad.
Come on.
Like Johnny Knoxville, the original Jackass.
I'm kidding.
Got a concussion.
No, but I mean, come on. What do you do? You got to vet these people. Who are you hiring right now when they're literally driving in a golf cart and they can't make a, simple turn? It looked like Austin Powers in there. Go Google it, look at the meme. It's funny. But yeah, that's my final words. Like, learn how to drive a golf cart. Come on.
I can't go any further into that, but allegedly some friends and I may have taken the Round Table Pizza cart from campus, which that wasn't us. It was just a story, but long story short, we didn't have a designated, well, that's even going down a different path, but who's the person responsible? Like, that should be a designated person to drive the cart, and especially with all the people and those particular people on board. So I did see that. It reminded me of years past, and But maybe we have the practice from golf and beer. I don't know, but that was pretty effing funny. Let's go straight, Tom. There's a lot going on in the world today. I don't know where you're going with this. You always speak straight from the heart, which I don't really have one, my wife says. So I always look forward and appreciate what you have to say. So no pressure, but let's end the show with you.
Well, I come with usually non-sports related things, or I try to give the show a little bit, and we all have the ability to change gears, so to speak, when we need to. What happened last night? Just tragic situation, and you got teenage kids that lost their lives, and I've had the luxury, and I apologize for getting emotional here. I've had the luxury recently of I have my stepdaughters full time now, and I'm proud of that. It's probably the greatest gift I've ever been given. The girls want to live with us; they're living with us, and it kind of makes what happened yesterday surreal. Like, I couldn't imagine putting my girls on a plane and then they'd not come back. And politics aside, unbelievable. I can't imagine the parents. These were very special kids, 12, 13 years old, boys and girls, figure skating teams that, they got on a plane going to Washington, D.C., it experience of a lifetime, and never thought in a million years that would be the end of their life, in a crash into the Potomac. So I guess the message that I want to get across is don't take for granted every minute you have with your kids. I cherish every minute I have with my girls. I don't get to see a lot of them with my work schedule, but if I get 5 minutes, I want to make those 5 minutes count. I know, Brandon, you love your daughter. You have a special bond with her. And Raj, you have, your son, the sports. It's just my eyes have been open to what the importance of family and kids really are. And, I didn't have the ability to have them full time for the previous, almost 8 years, and they're here now. And there's nothing that would stop that from continuing. And I'm proud of that. So, tell your kids you love them, give them a hug. And if you don't even want to say it, just do it, because there's a lot of parents that are going to bed tonight that will never have that chance to do that with those kids. And it's just tragic, and it makes you really appreciate life. And I know this is a sports show, and I know Rich Jasper is going to watch, and he's going to make fun of me because I am emotional, and I'm proud of that. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. I'm not afraid to cry, because things matter. Important things matter to me, and being part of the show matters to me. It's important. It's a camaraderie that we have, and but you know what? It's important to take care of what matters most to you, and go to bed tonight and tell your kids you love them, and give them an extra hug, because you know what? Tomorrow's not guaranteed, and the older I get, the more I realize that the little things I never thought were important, they're damn important. And the day the girls told me they wanted to live with me and their mom here, that was probably the best day of my life, and outside of marrying their mom. So don't take those little things for granted. So with that being said, I'll get off my soapbox, and love being a part of this show, and I apologize for the emotions, but that's who I am.
No need to apologize, man.
Yeah,
I think that's the beauty of it. Yeah. Just perfectly said, per usual, because you're not thinking about it ahead of time per se. It's coming straight from the heart.
Yep.
And I just so succinctly and poignantly say things. It's quite amazing to me. But yeah, and in that sense, and wasn't going to say anything after that, but I often don't appreciate something until it's gone. we learn the hard way in life, any cliche you want. And so when you do see that, yeah, it's just awful, whoever it may be, with, you know, the runway being 3 seconds away at 300 miles an hour, you're literally almost home. And it doesn't matter when it may happen, but anything could happen. So appreciate what you have today and every day and every moment, because just like that, or, you know, my friends who lost their homes or who almost did within 14 minutes from your fine to major alert on your phone, you've got to leave now or else you will die. Sounds very caustic, but, you know, nothing's guaranteed in life.
Nope.
So for myself, Raj, I feel weird saying my own name. That sounded wrong. Brandon Chain and Tom Sloan and Robbie Davis, who hopefully is wasted somewhere.
Oh, he is.
We are Reckless Speculation. It's great to be back. And next week, we're going to get into the Super Bowl more. So thank you, everyone. And again, Tom, thank you for putting it that way. That was very well said. So good night, everyone. Take care and appreciate what you have.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Reckless Speculation. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, searching Reckless Speculation. Catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We look forward to catching you right here next week with another exciting episode of Reckless Speculation. Cheers.